Hey guys, welcome back to Convert a Warm, Cheerful Web Design to HTML and CSS. So, in this chapter, we will be compensating for Internet Explorer. So that's your first decision when dealing with IE is decide what do you want to compensate for. Do you want to compensate for Internet Explorer 6? It's up to you. Right now, the statistics are roughly around 9% of all web usage is IE 6. But you also have to factor in what kind of site you're building. If you're building a portfolio site, you can probably push that up. If you're building maybe a government website or something like that, you should probably offer IE6 support. It just really depends. To give you an idea, for like my personal site, I wouldn't touch IE6 with a 10-foot pole. But if I were doing some client work, maybe where older people would be accessing the site, then yes, maybe I would consider it. So for this particular case with our site, it's a very simple, just almost like a little company about me site. We don't need to worry about IE6, so we're not going to worry about that. So with that in mind, we're covering IE7, IE8, and IE9. Okay, step 2, look at the site, see how it looks. This is a dreaded process. I think you can find that every single web designer puts this process off as long as possible because it determines at the very end whether you have another 5 hours worth of work or 20 minutes. So that's the first step. If you're a Mac user, if you're an IE user, of course, it's very easy. You can install a program called IE Tester. That's a very popular one. My debug bar, and what this allows you to do is view your site in IE 6, 7, 8, and the newest version, of course. Now, if you're a Mac user, you have a couple options. One, you could play it safe and go buy, like a little mini netbook. That way you can get IE9 on it or any of the IE versions. Or if you're only on a Mac, you should probably use some kind of virtual drive, virtual computer. So for example, I use a virtual machine called VMware Fusion. It's very popular. And what's nice about this is it has a mode called Unity. And what this means is it allows you to run Windows and Mac kind of at the same time. So to give you an idea of how that works, I have IE Tester running at the moment, and if we can find it, here it is. So this is a PC program, but it's running on my Mac. And you'll find, unless you have just incredible amounts of RAM, you might notice a little slowdown, but it's fine because you won't be open too long. All right, so first step, let's go ahead and open this site within the latest version, IE8, and see how it looks there. And usually it won't be too bad. So I'm going to open this page and let's go ahead and move to full screen and see how it looks. So right off the bat, it doesn't look too bad. But I do want you to note a couple things. One, as expected, we're not getting the rounded corners, although IE9 does support rounded corners, so you'll get it there. We're not getting any of the animations that we might get in a WebKit browser. Okay. Notice here, looks like we have some spacing issues, but I did notice that the same thing is true in Chrome. So probably in the last lesson we did something where we applied some margins to input. So we want to make sure that this input is right on that right edge. All right, let's go back. What else? Let's scroll down. Okay, we're not doing too bad here, believe it or not. This is pretty good, actually. You'd believe some layouts. That looks okay. We still need to work on the tabbing area. Okay, by default, though, it looks like we have some issue here where the tabbing isn't taking effect. And this can happen even if you have a little bug where you have an extra space. IE9 will get confused. But then if you click here, you'll notice that it does fix itself. So there's something happening at the very beginning. And I'll tell you what that is. If we go into Espresso, and let's go into our style sheet, I'm pretty sure we're using nth child, are we not? Nth child. Let's look for tabs maybe. And let's scroll down and find it. And we have this right here, UL not first child display none. This is something that IE 8 and below don't support. And IE9, I'm not sure yet. It's still being updated, so I'm not sure on that one. They might support this. So what we need to do is remember that IE 8 and below aren't always going to support some of these advanced selectors. So keep that in mind. All right, let's scroll down a little bit more. And okay, we got some spacing issues there. But luckily, this is pretty darn good, believe it or not, to come and see this. We're doing pretty well. All right, so now it gets a little bit worse. Let's check out IE7. All right, imagine it gets a little worse. Okay, in IE7, all right, we have an issue right here where it looks like there's margins being applied right up here, and that's why we're getting that different background color. Okay, and we have an issue here with the search, so we got to get that fixed. Ooh, issues with our buttons where it looks like for some reason they're inheriting a lot of padding right. So we got to fix that. What else? Same issue here. Okay, it looks like we're getting that the stair-step effect, and that is when you're floating an element, but maybe it's within a block level element. There's a lot of tutorials around the web on this, and the key to fix that is to set the element display to inline. So we'll get that fixed. And what else? Yeah, it looks like we have some automatic scrolling applied here. That's okay. But actually, this one's not too bad as well, although we do need to get rid of this area at the bottom. The blue should be locked to the bottom. But other than that, this still isn't very bad at all. Not too bad. All right, if you just want to have some fun, let's check this out in IE6 as well and see what we're not going to be fixing. What you can do is, in IE6 users, there's something called the Universal Style Sheet, and it's basically a stripped down version so that people in IE6 can still access your site. They're just not going to see some of the nice features you have here. So right off the bat, you can see in IE6, it doesn't support alpha transparency, so you're going to get white backgrounds there. You see we have issues here, lots of strange issues because we're using a ping 24. You can see here this has fallen down below because of probably a double margin bug or something like that. Now, I will tell you one thing about dealing with IE6 is it's a lot scarier than it really is. So you look here and think, oh gosh, it's ruined. What you'll really find is sometimes just applying a couple of properties like resetting the margin or setting position to relative or zoom 1. That will fix miraculously many of the layout issues that you have here. But we're not going to worry about this at all. We're focusing on IE7 and IE8. All right, let's go back to Chrome. First thing we're going to do is see how much JavaScript improvements we can get away with. So we're going to use something called Selectivizer. And what this allows you to do is, it's JavaScript, so it depends on JavaScript, but it emulates CSS3 pseudo classes. So things like the not pseudo selector or pseudo class that we went over before. So the way it works is it works in tandem with your JavaScript library of choice. So you see it detects what your library is. In this case, we'd be using jQuery. And it gives us support for things like this. It has structural pseudoclasses nth child. Let's see if it has not. Yep, it supports not. So that is exactly what we need here. And you can see, just include this script in your page's head tag. So let's grab that. But we also need to download it, of course. So I'm going to download that right now. And let's hide all of this, unzip this, and I'm going to rename it to Selectivizer. Okay, and let's open this up and see what we have here. So we have the development, and that's if you want to look into the code, but what we really want here is the minified version. So we'll grab that and place it in. All right, so I'll just grab this file and bring it over to, whoops, my JS folder. Now that's stored there. All right, and we're all done there. So let's go ahead and close this out. And next, let's go back into Chrome and copy and paste this. And we got to put it within our head tag. So that's something you need to be aware of. Don't put it in your footer. You need it in the head tag so that the properties can receive. Okay, let's go back into index.html and we will place it right here. Okay, a type of text / JavaScript, that is not needed, so we can get rid of that. And we need to reference jQuery first. So I'll go ahead and import that. And we're at version 1.4.4 at the time of this writing. Okay, so close that out. And next, what does this snippet show? All right, it's saying if greater than IE6 and less than IE8. Or I'm sorry, greater than or equal. So this is pretty much saying IE6, IE7, or IE8. Or what you could do at the same time is just say if less than IE9. And that's what we're going to do here. So next, let's just grab all of this, since we already have one set up, and paste that in. Okay, script. So first we're importing the HTML5 shiv. We went over that in a previous lesson. It just allows us to use some of the new HTML5 elements in our markup. Next, we are importing Selectivizer, but that's stored within the JS folder right here. So I need to reference that properly. And then finally, a no script tag is only the contents of this tag will render if JavaScript is disabled. And in that case, what they're saying is just link to a fallback style sheet. And we'll do that later. So I'm going to get rid of this entirely for now. Okay, so that should be just fine. So we'll save that. And now let's go back into IE tester, and we need to do a hard refresh. So if I go into IE8, and let's take a look at something to see if it's updated. We want to make sure that this tabs, when it loads by default, it should be updated. So refresh complete. And now we do get an error. Access is denied. Okay, so I paused for just a moment to figure it out, and here's the thing. You'll find this often is that when you're working with scripts and some files on your local host, they won't work as you might expect. So if you ever come across that situation, take your files and upload them to your host or your server, and then try it again, and I bet 9 times out of 10 that'll fix the issue. So what I've done is I paused and I took all of our files and I uploaded them to my particular host, and now we're going to refresh the page. And you can see they're stored on demo.mysite.com. So no longer are we getting that error, and if I scroll down, you'll see, sure, now that Selectivizer is providing support, so cool. Now we just have a couple other issues though, as I noticed that when I uploaded these, some of our backgrounds aren't showing up. And if that ever happens where it works on your local host and then you upload to your server and they're not working anymore, it's usually going to be a naming collision where you're using a capital letter instead of a lowercase letter. So because we're working on my server at this point, we're going to go into a third editor. We're going to use Coda. So this is a good option to let you see 3 different editors over the course of this series, and you'll find that some are better for some tasks. Espresso has an FTP option, but I think for working on your server, Coda is far and away the easiest to use. You can just click on your sites, you can click the file you want, and then you're immediately in there and you can begin editing your files. So that's another reason I switched over, just to give you an option of different editors to use. So now let's go into our images folder, and if we go back we can see there's issues with the banner. So that's going to be my first debugging tool, and we're going to search for banner. Okay, and we can see right here banner BG. So let's take a look at that, and if we come into images, I can see right off the bat banner is lowercase, but here it's uppercase. So let's change that one, and the same thing below. Many times that'll be a problem in some browsers. So if I save it, it updates it on my server. And let's first go back to Chrome, refresh the page, and see if that fixed it. And good, it did fix it. Now let's test it out in IE8, do a hard refresh, and good, the glitch has been fixed there as well, and now we're not getting any errors. So just remember, if any issues, try uploading it to your server first. So what Selectivizer does is it gives us the ability to use CSS3 selectors and properties in our style sheets without having to worry about IE. So we have a couple more issues. It looks like I just went crazy with these namings. So let's search for who we, and that'll probably be within index.html, right? Who we are. And let's go in here, and yep, I have this exact problem. I'm sure you guys saw that at the time. And let's look at Graphic River. Let's go into banners. And here, Graphic River, we need to make sure that's uppercase. Okay, so let's save that and come back and see how it looks now. One more refresh. Okay, and now those are showing up as well. So we've lucked out quite a bit. This looks pretty darn good actually, considering what you could end up with. So if we scroll down, really in IE8, no noticeable issues. The only thing I see is something right up here where we got to fix that, but that's in all browsers. So good job in IE8. Now let's view IE7. Refresh all complete. Okay, and we do have this background issue, so we got to get that fixed even with Selectivizer. And it looks like there might be some spacing issues right here, but Selectivizer did allow us to use that. It's given us support for things like nth child last or last child. We still have the stair steps, so I got to get that fixed. And we got to get this padding issue fixed as well. All right, so the next step is determine how you want to compensate for it. If you have lots of glitches in IE, you should probably go ahead and create a conditional style sheet, and you'd go to index.html, and at the very top you might import a linked file like this. That would be ie.css. Now if there's only a handful of things that you need to fix, then you can use some browser hacks. So it really just depends on how many issues you have to fix. So I'll show you the browser hack method, and let's find something to fix. Scroll back to the top, or let's work on these buttons first. So let's go back into index.html, and we're going to search for submit. Okay, and that is a button. So let's search for where we styled our buttons, and we have our banner. Let's keep going, footer button. There should be one more right here. So why don't we style this one right here. Now if we want to target IE7 and below, you can use the star hack. So what this does is you prefix your property with a star, and modern browsers will come across that star. It won't understand it, so they will skip the property entirely. IE8 will do the same, but IE7 will see that and it'll just assume it's a typo and it'll go ahead and register it. So let's search for something like something really noticeable, and we'll say color is red, and hopefully that'll take effect. So now let's go back into IE tester, and we need to make sure that we are in IE7, and we'll do a hard refresh. And while we're at it, we'll close out IE8. Now, can you see that that's taking effect? But if you go back into Chrome and I do a hard refresh, you'll see that Chrome and any other modern browser will still retain the original styling. So that's a nice way, if you need a quick fix, is use the star hack. Now, in addition to the star hack, there's also something called the underscore hack. And the only difference is, and we're not going to be using this one, but this will target IE6 and below only, presumably. Underscore, IE7 will even see this and go, nope, skip it. So this is IE7 and IE6, and this one is going to be IE6. Okay. So I'm going to leave these in, but just note that that doesn't really mean anything right now because we're not compensating for IE6. So color red, that's obviously not what we need, but we do need to figure out what's going on. So now that we know how to target them, why don't we let's try setting text align to center. And we can see if it's just a width issue or if it's something else. Refresh the page and come down. Yeah, and that does get centered perfectly. So what's happening is somehow I would imagine the padding or the margins are being doubled. So we can come back, and here we can try saying something like let's try setting display to inline and see if that fixes it. Sometimes it does. Refresh complete. And we scroll to the bottom. No, sometimes do it one more time just to make sure you're getting a non-cached version. Okay, so that doesn't fix it. So why don't we instead try to reduce the padding? And we'll say padding 5 pixels and 10 pixels. And notice that what we're doing here is we're making that exactly half of what the other browsers have. Refresh, complete. And that's going to look better for those. Okay, so let's compare the differences. Chrome, and it looks like we're still getting a lot of padding on the left and right, more than we should. So sometimes, you know, there's usually a reason for it. You can find maybe setting zoom to 1 or position to relative. And by the way, I'm going to go ahead and... So in this case, why don't we just try setting the left and right padding to 0, because maybe it's inheriting it somewhere else. If we scroll to the bottom, yeah, and that looks a lot better. All right, so that takes care of that problem. All right, let's scroll back up and see what else we have. We have this search and label issue. So let's find out where that occurs within our project. And it'll be within our form. So we have this P. Why don't we try using a label here? And the way the label works is it's smart to use these whenever you can. Is it associates the label and the text with the input that follows it. And also it gives you the bonus that when you click on the label, it'll trigger the input. So that itself shouldn't do anything, but it gives us something to latch onto. And because we've applied that label, if I click on it, you'll see that it activates the input. So try to use labels whenever you can. Okay, so next let's go back into our style, and we're going to go to the form section. Header form, all right, and P. And why don't we try this? We'll say header label, and that'll be floated to the left. Refresh. Yeah, and that seems to fix it mostly. So now we just need to make the spacing correct. Okay, and it looks like there's not. So we can do padding top 15 pixels and see if that helps. Okay, just a little too much, so we're going to take that down about halfway, and that should do it. Okay, and it's a little too much, so maybe 3 pixels. Now remember, when you set this, though, make sure that you're targeting only IE7 and below, otherwise you're going to screw up the layout in modern browsers. So let's try that out again. One more refresh to be sure. And I'm still not happy. Let's switch it to 5 and that'll do it. Okay, now we also need to take care of this spacing issue, but I did find that that exists in all the browsers. So what I'd imagine is that somewhere some spacing is being applied. And the way I like to check out these layout issues is to come into Firefox. So refresh the page here. And if we go into Firebug, we can get a full layout perspective. So come here and notice how the P element here, if I hover over it, that takes up all the way to the right border. So somewhere there's being some margins applied. So at this point, I would go to the layout tool and take a look if anything's being applied there. Okay, no, which makes me think that it's probably the input. And if I hover over the input, notice that there's 20 pixels of padding there. What happens if we zero that out? Okay, so that's not going to do it. So it's probably a margin issue. And I'll come over here and zero that one out and see how that pushes that back down. All right, so let's target that. So we want to go into header input. Here, header input, and we will specify no margin right. Refresh that page and make sure that takes effect and there's no specificity issues, which there might be. And it looks like there is. So remember, if you want to make sure that it's a specificity issue, make sure you set important. Refresh the page. And now see how that's taken effect. All right, so if you want to deal with important, don't try to keep important in unless very rare circumstances where it makes sense. In this case, you can always just be a little more specific and see how to target it. So let's test this out, and we would go into maybe header form P input. Header form input. Let's first try that one, and what that's going to do is it's going to apply roughly an extra 10 points worth of specificity, which is kind of a sloppy way of figuring it out. Okay, and that's still not enough. So in that case, when it's still not enough, you want to be careful about being too specific. So why don't we try to find where it's originally applied? So I can search for margin right 10 pixels, and we can see it right here is being applied. Okay, so width margin right is 10 pixels. So if you want, the only place where we really need that to be applied is within the footer. So why don't we go to the very bottom and we can look for it. And rather than applying it here, we could do footer input type equals text and then paste that in. Okay, so let's try that out, and then let's make sure we go back to header form. And now that we have that applied, we can get rid of this because we don't need any extra properties. So refresh, and now that's right up against the right edge, as you can see right there. All right, so that's fixed that issue. Let's make sure it's been fixed within IE7, and it should. Okay, that looks good. The next step is we got this spacing issue that you can see right there. So what I'm going to do is let's go into Coda and let's find the banner, and we're going to set a border top. Let's first override this with a background of red and a border top of 5 pixels solid green. That way I can get a good outline, and we'll change that from border top to outline. A good outline of where our elements are. And we're not even seeing our outline, but we do know that this isn't coming up. So we're going to try some more here. We're going to try a margin top of 0, and I'm going to set important as well. And remember, we're only doing this for testing. Okay, so we know it's not a margin issue here. It could be a margin issue with the header as well. And we're going to say margin top negative 20 pixels and try that one. There you go, and that fixes it. So somewhere there was 20 pixels being applied. You could spend an hour figuring it out, or you can just be smart about it and either put this in an external style sheet or just add it right there. And you can even leave a comment, weird positioning bug. Sometimes that helps you so you know why you did that. Okay, so that's fixed. IE7 isn't looking too bad. We have all that. The spacing issue here, we fixed our inputs. We use Selectivizer. Now one thing is I think there's too much spacing being applied there. Notice you got that, and then if we go back into this one, it's too much. So let's figure out how to compensate for that. First, I'll go into Firebug and figure out what my container is. In this case, it's main. So let's go into Coda, search for main, and padding top. So why don't we try in IE8 setting padding top to, I'm sorry, in IE7 setting the padding top to half that value. There we go, and that's fine. Many times you'll see issues where things are doubled, and it can be for a variety of reasons. Sometimes the element before it is getting stretched too much. Like I said, just take it easy and do the quickest way to compensate for these old browsers. So that looks good. That looks good. That's working. The layout here is good. We got to get that. And is there anything else we need to worry about? We need to get these inputs fixed. And let's see how that looks in Chrome while we're here. Yeah, and that's not an issue with IE8. So that will be fixed in the final lesson where we clean everything up and make sure everything's good to go. So only other thing I want to do here is make sure we fix this sponsor section. So let's go in here and we'll search for sponsors and images, and I'm pretty sure it's probably going to be a display issue. Let's try this. We'll do sponsors li, and you know what we should do is we should go into Firefox and figure out exactly what is being applied there. So if we go into li, you can see if we go to computed, this is everything that was used to register it. So you can see if we want to go to floats, let's look for it. Okay, so there's no floating being done. What about the display? They're being set display list item. So there's no floating, so what's making these display one after another? Now let's go to the images and check that out. Display block. And I think that's got to be the issue, but they are being floated. So you're floating an element within an element that's a block level element. All right, let's try this out. Sponsors li, and we'll set display inline, and I'm going to set important just to make sure that that's the case. And let's try that out. Come back into IE tester, refresh. There we go. Yeah, and it's a small issue. Working with IE is one of those things where the more you do it, the more you understand what you need to do, if that makes any sense. And this is a case, if you ever have that, just Google stair-step bug, IE stair steps, or something like that. And the last thing I want to do here is make sure that targets IE7 and below, and I'll leave a comment here for myself, stair steps. Final refresh, make sure that takes effect even without important. And come back up. And sure enough, it does. Okay, so we have successfully compensated for IE. The only last thing I see here is if we go into Chrome, we have a nice bit of padding on the top and here. But if we go back here, there's not as much padding there. So let's fix that. And that's the last thing we're going to do here. Banner wrap. And there it is, padding bottom. So why don't we try padding bottom and see if that helps a little bit. And maybe that did something, but not that I noticed. So why don't we try it 60. And what we're doing here is just seeing if padding is being affected at all when we set it really high. And it is. So let's just figure out the right amount. And like I said, if you want, you can go and try to be really exact about this and figure out exactly where that's coming from. But it's going to lower your hourly rate quite a bit. So I think this is fine. Looks good in IE7, looks good in IE8. In the next lesson, we're going to do our final cleanup, and that's going to consist of validation. It's going to consist of typography, getting all of this set up. It's going to consist of any final bugs or layout issues that we want to make sure looks nice. And that will complete our entire series. So I'll see you guys then. Bye.